In this video, I'm gonna run you through 10 quick tips to improve your environmental portrait photography. And by environmental portraits, I mean portraits of people, but more in a travel adventure context. So photos of locals or self-portraits of yourself, or even shots where you have a person standing in the distance behind an epic backdrop. So let's jump in with the first tip, and that is to not be afraid to ask locals for photos. So if you're in a place that you like the wardrobes people are wearing, or you just see a person doing an interesting thing, and just in general when you're traveling, you see a lot of creative looking people walking around. And my advice is to just walk up and ask them for a photo. The worst they can say is no. And I say about 75% of the time, especially if you walk up with a friendly smile on your face, then they're going to say yes. So you can do a little bit of posing with them too, I've found you can get away with. So, get them to look at a certain point, perhaps angle the shot so that the lighting is good. And I always like to show them the photos after. And if it's a great photo, I'll get their contact info and just send it to them for free, because it's a great way to make friends on the road. So don't be afraid to ask people for shots. The second tip I have is to shoot candid photography. So quite the opposite of asking people for photos, but the point here is to not be afraid to just take photos of random people while you're walking around. I know it can seem intimidating and almost feel a little bit creepy to walk around with a camera and be shooting people, but there are a few tips I have to mitigate this. The first is to get a long lens, so something you could zoom with from a distance, and you could be more hidden in the background while you're taking a photo from far away. Also, keep in mind that within most first world countries, you're well within your legal rights to take photos of people in public. So just keep that in mind that, you can't necessarily get in trouble for this. However, the rules do change a bit if you get into third world countries. So just be a little bit more careful. I usually like to ask locals if this is an area where you can do that, because you don't want to be walking around a neighborhood that's bad where there's drugs going around and you're walking around with a giant camera taking photos. That's a no-go. So just keep in mind the environment you're in, and every once in a while, even if you're in a place where it's perfectly legal to do it, you might get someone that's upset at you. But, I just try to be nice to them, and I pretend like I delete the photo, but I actually keep it anyway. The third tip I have is to use props. So if you see a person interacting with an object in an interesting way, this is a good chance for a photo. So if you see someone cooking or playing an instrument or knitting something, it's gonna make that shot that much more interesting because it gives a backstory to the photo. So look out for that. And this also pertains to portrait sessions with just friends. So say you're not in an interesting country where they're knitting all these crazy fabrics in a crazy street alley. If you're just with a friend and you're in a park and you want to change it up, what I like to do is just say, you know what, let's go to a store today. We're going to pick out a random object and we're going to figure out how to incorporate this into the shoot. So for example, check out these photos right here. So one day we went to Michael's, found these yellow flowers, decided we were going to put it over her face, and now we have a totally interesting concept that's completely different from a normal portrait shoot. So look for objects, figure out how you can incorporate them. The next tip I have is to look for action in portraits. So if someone is doing something interesting, not just holding something, doing something. So are they running? Are they jumping? Are they riding a horse? Are they juggling? Any type of movement that you can capture in a shot is going to give it that extra dynamic twist that's going to make it that much cooler. So look for movement out in the world. The next tip I have is to focus the eye. So the primary thing in portrait photography is you want the eye to be in focus. If everything else is bad, at least have the eye in focus. It's the #1 thing. So obviously, if the person's all the way across the street, then you're not going to focus on their eye. But if they're looking at you or they're a couple feet away from you, train your focus to be on the eye. And as I discussed before, some cameras actually have an automatic eye detector that'll make this that much easier for you. So utilize this feature. The next tip I have is for environmental portraits where you want someone way off in the distance. And say you have your friend and you want them to go stand way on a rock ledge that's going to take about 10 minutes to get over to, and you want to position them overlooking this cliff. The best way I've found to do this is to get a set of walkie-talkies. So you each get one, and then you could help move that person over to wherever you want them without having to worry about phone calls or cell signal, because a lot of times you're going to be in the middle of nowhere and not having a cell phone and just trying to yell across a canyon, especially if it's really windy, isn't gonna work out. So walkie-talkies can be a lifesaver. The 7th tip I have is for self-portraits. So how do you take a photo of yourself standing way off in the distance if you don't have a buddy with you that day? And the way I've found to do this is to use the time-lapse mode within your camera or to get an external intervalometer. This will allow you to program your camera to count down at any time period. So you could say, for example, after 2 minutes, I want you to take 50 shots alternating between 1 second. So this will allow you 2 minutes to go get to the destination you want to be at, and then your camera will automatically take 50 shots for you 1 second apart. And then during that 50 seconds, you can do a variety of different poses. So I like to move a foot or two to the left, a foot or two to the right, maybe a little bit forward, try standing on a rock, put your leg up, just try a bunch of different positions. So when you get back to your camera, you can have a variety of shots to choose from. And this is a really easy way to get photos of yourself. Just make sure you have that camera in focus where you're gonna be standing before you go out to the spot. And if for some reason you can't nail the focus on a certain spot, say you're in a field and there's no object to focus on, one thing you could do is get a secondary tripod and bring it out to the field, set it up, and then align focus on that thing. And then when you're out there, you can drop the tripod down and get the shot. So good way to get focus if there isn't an opportunity to do so. The 8th tip I have is if you are shooting with a person you've never shot before. So say you're getting paid for a small session, the best way to navigate this is to make sure the person's comfortable. I'd say this is more important than anything else. The person's essentially going to mirror the emotions that you are having. So if you're having a good time, you're a happy, positive person, then they're going to be happy and positive, and the shots are going to come out great. If you act anxious or a little bit awkward, they're going to look anxious and awkward in your shots, and it's just not going to look very well. So you just want to come in with a happy mindset and just get the person relaxed. One thing I like to do is sit down and just talk to the person and hang out for 30 minutes before the shoot. So, you know, get a drink, get a coffee, whatever, and just get to know them a little bit. Just break through that awkward initial barrier where you just meet someone and you're like, yo, what's up? How's your day been? You know, get through that a little bit so you can start having a conversation flowing. Then while you're shooting, you can continue that conversation and it's just gonna feel much more natural. So one thing to keep in mind is that a lot of the best shots are gonna happen when you're just talking. So say you're just joking back and forth and they laugh at one of your jokes, that's when you wanna take a shot. You don't wanna do it when you're like, all right, I'm gonna shoot the camera, silence, taking photos. Having a natural conversation while you're shooting and then reacting to their emotions is a great way to get more candid and great shots. One final tip for working with people is to turn on music. So get a little portable speaker, get some vibes going, and it'll make the session that much more relaxing for both of you instead of just dead silence. The 9th tip I have is to study posing guides. So I'm not gonna get into this too heavily because this is an adventure photography course and not a portrait photography course. But if you really want to get good at portraits, then start to look at different ways to position people. So there's certain poses that work much better for men or certain poses that work better for women. And if you could study and learn these, especially cropping, that's another thing. So where do you crop on body parts to make the shots look good? Your portrait photography will go from 0 to 100. So the portrait guides are what it's all about. The final tip I have is for delivering the photos to people. So once you get a bunch of shots of someone, they're all edited and ready to go, the last step you should do is just flip all of those photos horizontal. And this is because this is the orientation that people are most used to looking at. So whenever they wake up in a mirror every day, this is the angle that they see themselves at. So they're naturally going to connect with it more on a subconscious level. If you just keep it the other way flipped, then their initial reaction is going to be a little bit surprised because they're not used to seeing themselves in that light. So just flip it, it's gonna make everything that much better. So those are my 10 tips for environmental portrait photography. Let's go ahead and jump into the next video.